I feel like every single day when you work in white collar corporate America, you have to tell yourself that this job is a transaction. You're putting in time and energy, they're giving you money and a title, but it doesn't go deeper than that.
Wait a minute.
This ain't a deep-rooted friendship or relationship. There's no real sense of loyalty here. This is very much me putting in something and me getting something back out of it. Hey everybody, Julian here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm just gonna be talking about some frameworks for y'all to think about if you're going into Biglaw, or maybe it's investment banking, consulting, or accounting, or even working in tech fields in intense companies like Tesla or Amazon. Just some habits that you can use and think about to survive as long as you can, and do so in a mentally healthy way in what are normally very intense white collar worlds. If you haven't already, hit that sub button. Now, I just said this, but I'm gonna say it again. The first thing you always gotta remember, guys, in any job, unless you're your own boss or perhaps you're super invested in your company or your cause, the job that you're doing is a transaction.
We have a deal.
There is no deeper loyalty that your employer has to you or that you should have to your employer. Now, it's very easy to get caught up in defining yourself by the role that you do and occupation that you have in this world, because it takes up so much of our time on a day-to-day basis. It is only natural to want to feel as invested as you can in that endeavor, in that company, in that cause. But the reality is, for most companies, they look at you as an expendable unit. They think about you as, okay, you are Julian, you cost us $100,000 a year, you bring us these benefits. As soon as it's convenient for them to kick Julian to the curb because Julian's skills aren't valuable, or because they don't have $100,000 to pay Julian, they're gonna do it and they're not gonna think twice. So when you care so deeply about your employer, I just want you to temper that a little bit, because it helps you create distance and actually invest a little bit less in your employer, which is going to be part and parcel to what we talk about today when it comes to boundary setting and saying no. When I was a junior associate, a senior associate once told me that saying no is your only survival mechanism in Biglaw. And that's because usually in Biglaw, it doesn't take long for the work to pile up to your eyeballs, and then past your eyeballs, on top of your head, and then through the ceiling, and then into the atmosphere. It just never ends. There's so much of it. And the way that law firms really make their money is by having their junior attorneys work crazy numbers of hours to bill more revenue for the firm that the partners take home, because of course the junior associate, mid-level, senior associate, etc. are paid a flat rate. And that's why it's super important for you to practice saying no.
Focusing is about saying no.
Because most of us in these professions, I think it's easy to be a people pleaser and say, yeah, I can help you with that. Yeah, I can help you with that. Yeah, I can help you with that. Like, it feels good to be needed and wanted. And it feels good to be busy, because you obviously, you don't want to be sitting on your hands and not busy either. If you're sitting on your hands and you're not busy, it doesn't look good from a reputational standpoint. It looks like people don't want to work with you because maybe you're not good at your job, or maybe you don't provide good quality work. So it looks good to be busy, and that's why it can be very hard for people to say no. But it is super important. It's super important because quality is more important than quantity. The quality of the work that you put out matters way more than how much of it you're doing. And if you want to retain that level of quality, you can only do so much work. You can't say yes to every project. I know that you're a human being on the other side of this screen. You're not ChatGPT. By the way, ChatGPT makes mistakes too. I got a math problem wrong last week that I asked it, but in any event, you're a human being. You can only do so much. That's why it's really important that you learn early on to say no. And of course, you can do it gracefully. Say, I really appreciate you thinking of me. I'm at my bandwidth right now, but I'd love to revisit this in a few months when I have more time. Or if you feel a lot of pressure to say yes, you can say, sure, I can take this on, but what do you want me to reprioritize? Because I have all these other things right now that I'm doing, and I can't do it all, so I'll need one of these things to be bumped off. So you tell me, right, what it is that you want me to substitute. But no matter how you do it, you gotta set your boundary. You gotta say no, because if you don't, I promise you, in Biglaw and in other intense industries, the work's just gonna pile up and you're eventually gonna get burnt out. And it's bad for the employer at the end of the day, because then you burn out faster and then you leave faster. So they don't really want that either. It's just that a lot of these companies don't have an effective culture to watch this type of workload piling up. And the result is a lot of people, and I can speak definitively in the Biglaw setting, a lot of people get overwhelmed and have just too much on their plate that is unsustainable for any human being or any lawyer. You also want to take vacation, guys. Vacation is a negotiated part of your compensation package. One thing that I never understood when I was in the Biglaw world were these attorneys that bragged about how they didn't take a vacation for the first 2 years that they were at their law firm.
What? What the fuck?
I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, I negotiated because everyone gets paid the same in Biglaw, but hear me out. I negotiated for a certain salary, for certain benefits like healthcare, for a certain number of days off per year in the form of vacation. By not taking the vacation, I'm basically leaving value on the table, right? I'm leaving the value of a couple of weeks of getting paid without doing work. I'm leaving that on the table. I'm also leaving on the table space for me to process my own mental health and take space from my job, reflect, enjoy life, do these other things. I'm leaving it all on the table. It's as if, in my mind, you're leaving part of your salary on the table. You're just giving it back to the law firm. Why would you do that, right? I don't think there's really much value in foregoing vacation. To be clear, this doesn't apply to cases where you're on like an apprenticeship-based short-term program. Like some law firms will have folks that come on as law clerks. And the idea is that it's almost like an interview period where like if you do a good job for a year, you'll be made associate. That's a little different, okay? I think like if you're not in a full associate role, then you can take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. Sometimes you gotta show them, hey, I'm serious, hey, I'm committed. You can trust me with a full-time associate role. But if you're talking about, a person fresh out of law school going into the industry, you should be taking your vacation as an associate full-time. I don't think there's any reason not to, and that's gonna make it more sustainable in the long term for you to stay in the field. There's also a real incentive to do good quality work.
I did it.
And that's because when you do good quality work, you get to be picky with who you want to work with.
You should be working in the finest restaurant in the world.
I've seen some of the best and brightest attorneys in my generation burn out in a matter of months because they're paired with a partner or a senior associate who's just not pleasant to work with, not very mindful of folks' feelings, really abrasive, really dismissive, just like not positive, constructive people to learn from. And they get paired with these people, and then before they know it, there's no one else they're working with, they're stuck with them, and then their only option is to leave the law firm entirely because they feel trapped under the wing of these people who just aren't very pleasant. If you do good quality work, you will go from selling to buying. No longer will people say, okay, Julian, you're assigned to this. They will ask you, hey, can you help me with this? And then you'll have 10 other people asking you too, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with this? And then you, as the junior associate, get to decide, I want to work with that person, or I want to do less work with you, more work with you. And that's really important because staying in these spaces in the long term in a sustainable way is going to require that you enjoy to some degree who you're working with. I have frankly not ever seen a case where somebody stays in Biglaw in the long term when they don't like their team. It's very rare, if it's even something that exists. I frankly don't know if it is. I don't think it does. This one is tough, but it's also important. You want to try to give less than your 100%. You want to give less than your 100% because the reality is in Biglaw and in these other industries, they're going to squeeze as much out of you as they possibly can. So you can rest assured that even if you're giving it 75, 80%, what they're going to receive is closer to 90 to 100% because they're going to be pushing you. You're going to get more and more work. You're going to be staying up later and later. You're going to be working weekends. You're going to be, you're going to be working really hard. That's part of the trade-off in working in these fields. So when it comes to jumping at every opportunity, for example, you get an email at 8 p.m. when you're in the middle of a workout. Do you respond immediately or do you wait 20 minutes, give yourself that space, enjoy your workout and finish it, and then do you respond? That's the type of thing I'm talking about. I'll admit I was very bad at this. I would always respond immediately. I'd have my phone on notifications on all the time. And unless I was asleep or in the shower, pretty much, I was like locked in and responsive to every single thing that came through the door when I probably didn't have to be. And the reality is, like, yes, that helped make me look like a better associate and responsive and all those good things, but it also just burned me out faster. And that's not the goal. The goal is never to burn out faster, all right? Like, would I have stayed in Biglaw in the long term if I didn't burn out? No, I can definitively say that. But I would have maybe lasted a bit longer and I would have been mentally healthier and less stressed, and that's all positive, right? That's the point here of this video is we're trying to live as happily as we can while having a demanding career. That's the goal.
Oh yeah. It's all coming together.
So this doesn't just apply obviously to responding immediately, but maybe it's doing weekend work. Maybe it's carving out time on a weeknight where you just don't check your email for 3 hours, and that's okay. Obviously, unless you have like a major deadline or filing deadline or a deal that you got to get done, like take everything I'm saying with diplomacy and a grain of salt. But the bottom line is you got to think about like, where can I put less effort in and take my foot off the gas? I'm going to do that. And the last thing I'll touch on is going part-time. This is something that not that many people even know exists in the Biglaw world. And you know, take this with a grain of salt in the other professions, consulting, accounting, I'm not sure about those. And if you do know, please drop them in the comments. Going part-time is great because you get paid pro rata based on the number of hours that you perform at. And so you can still do the work and you can still have the job title, and from the outside looking in, it looks like you're a full-time employee, but maybe you're doing 70%. So your hours are scaled down 30%, and then your pay is scaled down 30%. I did this before I ended up quitting my old firm, and it was great. It was wonderful. I quite enjoyed the work that I was doing. I just didn't have to do as much of it. It allowed me to say no a lot more freely because everybody knew that I was on a part-time schedule. And again, right, it helped me survive just a bit longer, even if the inevitable decision was for me to quit and go do other things. Now remember, in addition to all this stuff that we're talking about in the corporate realm, you got to invest in your own mental health. That means therapy. That means mental health meds if you need them. That means time outside, hydrating, eating well, sleep hygiene, reading books, staying off social media and doom scrolling as often as you can. These are things that you should keep in mind too, that when you're not working, to the extent you can invest in those things, it's just gonna make your mental health better, man, and that's the goal. And one last thing, there's this idea, and I'm even guilty of promoting it with the title of this video, that working in these spaces requires surviving, you know, as if your life is on the line and like you're gonna be completely emptied out and destroyed from being in these roles. I wanna make clear, guys, unless you're at like the most intense part of these professions, it doesn't have to be that bad. You know, I'm not gonna lie, when I was in Biglaw, yeah, the hours were intense and the work was a lot, but it wasn't horrible. You know, I was working 60 to 70 hours a week, occasional weekends, most weeknights. It was a lot, yeah, but I didn't feel like I was dying or anything. All right, everybody, hit that sub button if you haven't. I'm looking at you, unsubbed viewer, who's watching the channel and hasn't subscribed. Hit that sub button, please and thank you. I really hope this was helpful. Guys, if you have your own pieces of advice or tips on managing mental health in the workplace, drop them in the comments. It was wonderful to see you. Best wishes, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.